Whether any of this is ever found, I don't know. But if it is, it would change the course of America back to a true republic. Because what happened in this country is that we were overtaken by the security state. And we became a system of confidentiality and unaccountability. And it's a big, massive machine. And a lot of people are paid to keep quiet or to salute whatever the military industrial complex or the intelligence agencies are doing without asking questions. Because when you have $1.5 trillion a year spent on that, you're a pretty big business. And it has affected the universities, the think tanks, of course, the Congress, which asks no questions of any serious kind. And so major events of fundamental significance for our insecurity take place without any truth-telling at all. So all of this is to say, it may be the most important thing that President Trump could do would be to open up the historical record so that we understand what has really happened, because we are 90 seconds to midnight. We are closer to nuclear war than ever. We have a military machine in the service of the Israel lobby, or in the service of the military contractors, or in the service of the deep state on its own, or for whatever other crazy idea. And we just don't have democratic deliberation or accountability about this. But we could. If we did, we would change the direction of this country.
For 35 years, Liberty Safe has been the #1 manufacturer of safes made in this country, American made, from start to finish. They make high-quality gun safes, I've got one, vault doors, home safes, handgun vaults, whatever you need to protect the things you value. And again, I can tell you from personal experience, these guys know what they're doing. I use Liberty Safes for the things that I don't want stolen, the things that really matter. My father's shotguns, the documents that I've got to have, and a lot more. I'm not going to tell you what else, but you need one. Crime rates are way up. And if you have anything you would like to protect, that you need to protect, Liberty Safes is the way to do it. Now, Liberty Safe has over 350 dealers nationwide who specialize in delivery and installation and answering any questions you have. If you've got somebody to protect, they've got a way to protect it. Visit libertysafe.com, pick out what you need, and be sure to use the code Tucker at checkout to let them know that we sent you. They'll take care of the rest. Liberty Safe is a product we fervently believe in. With Liberty Safe, you are always protected.
Well, the system is designed with accountability at the heart of it. And we have oversight committees in the House and the Senate that are supposed to be making certain that the intelligence community, the IC, is operating in accordance with the Constitution of the United States. That's their job.
They obviously don't do their job, but what they do is very interesting. Our system of government is actually rather ingenious. It's ingenious because you can buy a piece of government at very low cost. If the military industrial contractors just buy off a couple committees, that's enough, because they're the only ones that have responsibility.
Yes.
If the health insurers just buy off the health committees in the House and the Senate, that's enough. If the Israel lobby just gets its hold on a couple of committees, they run American foreign policy in the Middle East. So what I have found to be ingenious about our completely corrupted political system is how inexpensive it is to buy your corner of the story. You don't control everything. No one controls everything. But if you want to control healthcare, it's a couple committees. If you want to control the military industrial machinery, that's just a couple of committees. And so there is no oversight. And there won't be oversight until there is public oversight. Nobody oversees themselves. And the idea that a few congressmen, and I know some of them, that they're really constraining anything that the CIA or the intelligence community does, no way. let me, we've talked about it before, but
Well, they're puppets. They're puppets of it.
Completely. And they're funded.
They need some scrutiny.
They're funded by it. They're puppets of it. There are almost no independent members of our Congress. Almost everyone is on the take. Rand Paul is my one exception. I think he's the most principled member of our Congress in both houses. He really believes in honesty and small government and wants to know the truth. And I'll give an example of the complete lack of oversight and something we may know and something we talked about. Okay, where did that pandemic come from? The evidence is now overwhelming, though still not definitive, that it was made in a U.S. lab. This is overwhelming. Even the report of the House committee that issued a report a couple of weeks ago says, yes, there was obviously a lot of cover-up and a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of engagement of U.S. scientists in this. And we know that the U.S. government lied up the wazoo on all of the question of the origin of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that made the pandemic, and has lied until today. We know that the intelligence agencies know a lot that they haven't said. So this is another area. Could we actually have some honesty? Could we actually have some transparency? Could we actually look at something where a pandemic took perhaps 20 million lives worldwide? Where'd that come from? Especially since the evidence is now overwhelming that it was a laboratory creation with U.S. scientists and U.S. funding playing a huge role in this.
Do you think the new president will pardon Edward Snowden and Julian Assange?
No. Snowden is a remarkable person. I don't know Julian Assange. I do know Edward Snowden, and he is an absolutely remarkable person. Yes, he is a hero because he told us what the government was actually doing towards us. And of course, the security state, which really runs America, therefore immediately branded him as the worst villain. But we found out more from Snowden about the risk to our freedom than from just about anybody else. And Julian Assange, I almost every day I invoke a memorandum that he enabled me to see and you to see and all of us to see that explains the Ukraine war better than anything else. And Julian Assange deserves all of the credit for this. And it's also an interesting story, if I may just say in 1 minute. Our current CIA director, William Burns, in 2008 was the U.S. ambassador to Russia. And when he was U.S. ambassador to Russia, he understood completely, perfectly, that the U.S. push to expand NATO to Ukraine was disastrous, pure provocation, crossing Russia's red lines, likely to create a civil war inside Ukraine and a possible war between the United States and Russia. And he wrote a memo back to Condoleezza Rice, who our Secretary of State. And the memo said that the entire Russian political class opposes NATO enlargement, and for real reasons. And that memo famously became known as "Niet" means "Niet." No means no. Don't play games with this. This is real. This is a red line. Okay, something like this should be understood by the American people. We've just spent around $200 billion. We've just caused deaths of perhaps 600,000 or 700,000 Ukrainians on completely false pretenses. On false pretenses that, as the New York Times has wrongly stated unendingly, that the war in Ukraine was, quote, unprovoked. Not only was it provoked, the U.S. provoked it, And not only that, our senior diplomats knew that at the time and wrote about it. Now, this memo makes this perfectly clear. Anyone can go online and type William Burns, Niet means Niet, cable, and you will come up with this cable, and then you can read why in 2008 we knew that the deep state push for NATO enlargement was mind-bendingly stupid, dangerous, provocative, and likely to get us into disaster, which it did. How do we even see that memo? Do you think that a congressional committee called Condoleezza Rice and said, could we have the documentary evidence to understand the choices you're making? Of course not. There's no oversight when it comes to security issues. We are already in a security state that has no resemblance to democracy whatsoever. But Julian Assange enabled us to see it. So we have to express gratitude for that. This is the truth. If you don't want leaks, don't have a world run where every consequential fact is hidden from the American people and it enables one disaster after another. And just to make clear how disastrous this is, Bill Clinton, who was, in my view, a completely ineffectual president in a long list of ineffectual presidents, came to office in 1993 when the doomsday clock was at 17 minutes from midnight, meaning that it was the farthest away from nuclear war in the whole history of the nuclear age. Every single president, starting with Clinton, brought the doomsday clock closer to Armageddon. So we went from 17 minutes to midnight to 90 seconds to midnight with no accountability or explanation at all.
Do you think it's fair to say that anyone who opposes pardons for Ed Snowden and Julian Assange should be looked at with suspicion, or is it actually an enemy of the country?
Well, I think that they may just be ignorant or don't understand, or maybe they're New York Times readers. You know, in other words, there are a lot of people who really don't understand the situation right now, don't understand how dangerous it is, don't understand how lawless it is, don't understand how we're driven by these long-term aims that are absolutely disastrous. I thank Mitch McConnell, by the way, for writing his essay that the goal is primacy.
Too late.
If our goal is primacy and we pursue that like this octogenarian who can barely function anymore says we should, we'll all get blown up. We'll move from 90 seconds to midnight to 60 seconds to midnight to 30 seconds to midnight and goodbye. Because we can't have a world where the United States says we're in charge of everything. If you aim that way, we will end up with World War III that will not go well.
Well, we're begging South Korea for munitions. So the truth is we don't have the power to affect that anyway.
But you know, this is the interesting thing. Already, you could know back in 2014, don't overthrow the Ukrainian government. You could know in 2015, honor the Minsk agreement that would end the war. You could know in 2021, negotiate with Russia because actually Ukraine, I won't even say Ukraine, the United States cannot win a war in Ukraine against Russia. We knew that, but these are not clever people. Jake Sullivan's not a clever person. They don't understand. They're like terrible poker players that somehow are sitting at the Grand Slam of poker. They don't know what they're doing, and they're bluffing and they're betting and they're doubling down with our money, by the way. And so yes, you could know this primacy thing. Come on, what does it even mean in a world of multiple nuclear superpowers?
That's right.
What does it even mean? It means we just ignore all of that till we're all blown to smithereens? No, but Mitch McConnell's barely functions anymore. But he's got the big story in foreign affairs about how we need to preserve primacy. So there's a lot of momentum and ignorance and deep state arrogance. Who the hell are you to tell us you don't even read the secret files? This is really where we have been for a very long time. Since 1991, the deep state, the CIA, and others have been trying to defeat Russia. Since 1991, Netanyahu's been with American military remaking the Middle East. It's been a disaster on both fronts. It's made America drastically less secure. But they continue, this group, in power. And there's a chance that President Trump could change this. This is the most promising single reality of his government if he chooses rightly. He has to understand he's got a completely divided team and he's got a completely divided landscape in Washington. And I think he knows the deep state is not going out with a whimper. It's going to fight for its prerogatives.
Are people worried about a terror attack in the U.S.?
I don't know. They don't tell me, and I'm frankly myself more worried about World War III.
Yes. So you said the president has assembled a divided team. One person who I think is pretty close to his stated objectives on foreign policy is Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes.
Who he's nominated to be Director of National Intelligence. The entire Senate Intel Committee appears to be against her. I think every member.
And that shows that she is completely on the right side.
Well, that's exactly right. Do you think she'll make it? How important is it that she make it?
She's probably, and I don't want to jinx anything, she's probably the most important appointment of the Trump administration.
It does seem that way.
She is incredibly intelligent, incredibly honest, incredibly committed to U.S. security, and would do a superb job. So that's why she's being opposed, because the forces that are worse than mediocre, that are right now on top of a $1.5 trillion a year machine, that have been running disastrous wars, that have been bringing us closer and closer to doom, don't want any accountability. And what Tulsi Gabbard would represent is competence, honesty, forthrightness, and not having been a party to all these failures.
So if you're the incoming administration, how hard do you fight for her nomination?
Well, she's critical because this is the most important question facing the United States today. We have many important questions. We have major financial, social, political, economic, institutional questions. But the most important question facing us is a country that potentially is more secure than any country in the history of the world going to do itself in by a self-provoked World War III. And we're on that course. And 5 presidents have been on that course through their incompetence and their obedience to an unaccountable deep state. And President Trump is coming in saying that he's going to change direction. He says every day that he wants to be president of peace. By the way, I think the greatest thing that could happen is 4 Nobel Peace Prizes for President Trump. He could end the war in Ukraine. He could end the war in the Middle East, not by bombing Iran, that would do the opposite, but by enabling a 2-state solution in the Middle East, and the wars would all end. He could end the talk of the war in East Asia, which would be the utter disaster and folly, by recognizing that we shouldn't be meddling in China's internal affairs, and Taiwan is an internal affair of China. And he should be restoring a framework of nuclear arms control. I give him 4 Nobel Peace Prizes for that. if he chooses that direction, he'll be the most consequential president in our modern history, perhaps in our history, because he will reestablish security for the American people. If he follows the hardliners, he's just going to add yet another years of bringing us closer to doom.
How is the Ukraine war settled?
The Ukraine war is settled literally in one call, just as he says, because all he has to do, really all he has to do, is pick up the phone and call President Putin and say, that 30-year effort to expand NATO to Ukraine and to Georgia was ridiculous, unacceptable, unnecessary provocation, and it's led us to this juncture. I'm against it. I'm going to say it publicly. We're going to end this adventurism, and you stop fighting today. And the fighting will stop that moment, actually. Then there will be details, and the details are where the borders will be drawn exactly. But the war will end. The war will not end, by the way, by saying, let's have a ceasefire. That's a meaningless statement. As you heard repeatedly from Foreign Minister Lavrov, and as I know, and as that anyone thinking about this knows, this isn't about a ceasefire. This is about a cause of this war. And the cause of this war is that Russia does not want the U.S. and its missile systems on its 1,200-kilometer border with Ukraine right now. And Biden was so stupid, and I'm using the term, of course it sounds, I don't know how it sounds, but it's true, that he couldn't say that and avoid the war, though it was obvious how to avoid this war. Obvious how to avoid this war. But Biden couldn't do it. That's why I say he's been such a terrible president. And I think that President Trump wants to do it this way. Now, again, he's got people around him of many different views. Some say, promise him, just ask for a ceasefire, freeze the conflict, armistice, Korean solution, 1953. This is completely beside the point. Russia isn't going to freeze the conflict. It's actually winning on the ground. But why is it fighting? It's fighting because it does not want this regime, which was installed by the United States in 2014, to have U.S. bases, NATO, U.S. weapons and missile systems on its border. And the fact that Biden just proved the point by saying, yeah, we'll fire the missiles into Russia, make it all the more clear why they're concerned about this. This isn't an idle threat. This isn't some dumb thing. They're being hit right now by U.S. missile systems, by U.S. personnel firing these missile systems. So it's not an idle threat. So people who say freeze the conflict, they don't get it. People who say, and there was an initial statement, NATO will not enlarge for at least X years. Somebody said 10 years. Somebody said 20 years. This is also completely ridiculous. Then another idea. Well, we'll give Russia this territory, Donetsk and Lugansk, and maybe Kherson and Zaporizhia and Crimea, but all the rest of Ukraine will be part of NATO. Of course not. It's the same deal. This is ridiculous. So if you understand what this is about, where it came from, why it continues to this moment, there is one phone call that ends it, which is get to the underlying cause of the war. The underlying cause of the war, going back to a decision that Bill Clinton made in 1994, is the decision to expand NATO to Ukraine. And by the way, they want to expand it to the South Caucasus, to Georgia, which is also in turmoil right now. It's very interesting, Tucker, that Zbigniew Brzezinski spelled this out to the letter in 1997. And it's fascinating to read his account. All wrong. He got it completely wrong. but he spelled it out. And what he said was in his book, The Grand Chessboard, in 1997, we should expand NATO eastward. We should expand Europe eastward. And we should ask the question, what will Russia do? Russia won't like it. So Brzezinski spends a whole chapter, what will Russia do? And he asks the question, well, could Russia ever align with China? Nope, that's not going to happen. Could Russia ever align with Iran? Nope, that's not going to happen. Russia's only choice is to accede to the U.S. action. So in 1997, it was perfectly clearly understood what is the strategy, what are we going to do, and what will happen. The only problem is it was wrong. Yes. This is the only problem. He got it completely wrong. And you can go back and, to his credit, he wrote his prediction. It's wrong. But why are we still playing that game until today? Why did Biden exactly continue on that failed course? Because he's a failure. That's why. Because he didn't understand. Because he's surrounded by mediocrities at best.
The Biden administration has tried to kill Vladimir Putin. That's a fact, I think. And they funded separatist groups within Russia, probably going back before Biden.
Well, this has been, by the way, CIA ops to have separatist groups everywhere. And fascinating, just if I could mention, because it's almost humorous, except that it's so tragic. There was I don't remember the exact name, but something around 1998 called the Chechnya Friendship Committee. Chechnya, okay. Burning issue for the United States? I dare 1 in a million of your listeners to know exactly where Chechnya is in its history, because who knows, who cares? But if you look at the Chechnya Friendship Committee, it was the blue ribbon committee of American neocons. Just big Brzezinski right there. Everyone that wants the hard line. Why? They couldn't care for one iota of a moment about Chechnya. Of course not. They wanted to break up Russia. Everything is antagonism.
So they fund Islamic extremism.
So they funded the jihadists everywhere. Exactly. And by the way, we made Al-Qaeda. I think everyone understands this. We made Osama bin Laden. We made this, the overthrow in Syria where they're saying, oh my God, it's HTS. What do you think? This was what Obama tasked in 2011-12. Jihadists.